This is the Montana Outdoor Podcast, brought to you in part by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. And by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. Now, get ready for more fascinating topics and the most interesting people you will ever find in Montana's great outdoors. We offer new podcasts most every Saturday. You can get a link to these podcasts by going to our website, montanooutdoor.com, or by going to our Facebook page, or just send an email to downrigger@montanooutdoor.com and say send a link to my email. It's that simple. Now let's head out with your host, Downrigger Dale, and see what's going on in Montana's great outdoors.
Thank you very much, Manny. And as Manny just said, this is Downrigger Dale with the Montana Outdoor Podcast. Hey, thanks so much, gang, for joining us here as we roll along. So great to have so many of you. Man, this podcast has exploded, and I can't thank you enough. I mean, from all over the place, of course, everywhere in Montana, as, after all, this is the Montana Outdoor Podcast, but also all over the world. A special thanks and hello to our active military out there. We are just so humbled and honored to have so many of you that tune into the podcast, and I hope wherever you all are, so many of you spread out all over the world, taking care of business and doing what you do. We all just want to thank you for your service, and hopefully this podcast brings a little bit of home back to you as you keep us free here in the good old US of A. Now, I want to continue on with a series that we've been doing about getting out of the old comfort zone and exploring more of the waterways that Montana has to offer you. You know, this is an amazing state. There's just so many great places to take the fishing pole and the boat or walk along a stream. But like a lot of fishermen, I'm guilty of it too. You get to a place, you know, that's why it's called your fishing hole. You go to that same place because you know where the fish are, you know the species that's in there, you know what they typically bite on and all that. And for you to get away for a weekend and try to figure out a whole nother waterway, well, gee, that could be tough. So as I've always said, it's a good idea to hire a local guide because they can really tell you a lot. But another great way is to do a little research and find out where you're going and what's there. One place that I have not talked about on this podcast, but is one I've got a lot of emails from all of you, is Noxon Reservoir, or I think a lot of people call it Noxon Rapids Reservoir. This is a unique place. It really is interesting, and one that up in northwest Montana, you really should go check it out. I think you're really going to like this place. It's got some unique stuff to it, but it's also, as some of you have pointed out, had some challenges to it. So I thought, well, let's bring on someone that knows this reservoir very, very well, and in fact, even helps to try to manage this great fishery as well. And his name is Travis Rame, and I want to bring you on here, Travis. Thank you so much for taking your time out to spend a little time with us and teach us a little bit about Noxon Reservoir.
Appreciate the opportunity, Dale. Yeah, we're just excited to talk about it.
Yeah. So, Travis, just so our listeners can get to know you a little better, tell us a bit about yourself and how you came to be part of the FWP and chose the career path you did.
Yeah. So I'm originally from Montana. Grew up in Southwest Montana, Dillon in particular. So yeah, go Beavers.
There you go.
Yeah. You know, I've been, it's kind of wild to think about now, but I've been in the fisheries career going on 15 years. Got my undergrad at Montana State University and my graduate degree at South Dakota State for fisheries science. But I've been in this position with FWP. I'm working on my fourth year here. And I'm a mitigation biologist, so I work on hydropower mitigation with Noxon Reservoir, Noxon Dam, what we're talking about here today, and also Cabinet Gorge. So working on recreational fisheries in the reservoirs and in the tributaries, but also doing a lot of work with native fisheries, bull trout, West Slope cutthroat in the tributaries, and conservation enhancement of those as well. But my job's fully mitigation with these hydropower operations.
Okay, so when you say mitigation, what do you mean by that as far as hydro mitigation?
Yeah, so historically this is a free flowing river, right? And we dammed it, or companies dammed it, right? And to create energy. And there's some unintended consequences to that for native species or the community or what have you. Fish passage barriers, marginal fish habitats for native fish species, but I mean there's some recreational fish species that like those habitats that we're going to talk about here today. But those unintended consequences that happen due to hydropower mitigation, water level fluctuations, power peaking, all those things that go along with hydropower generation there's agreements in these FERC operating licenses for hydropower companies, and they have to pay basically money to go towards mitigation projects or offsetting these impacts they're having by running hydropower operations. So that's what I work on.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Now, we'll get into some of the challenges that are there, and as you said, just some of the great species and sport fish that we can find in Noxon. But let's talk a bit about the reservoir itself. Tell us about Noxon Reservoir as far as, like its size and where it's located, all that stuff.
Yeah. So like you said, it's located up in northwest Montana, and it's an impoundment of the Clark Fork River. Noxon Reservoir is what we would call a run of the river reservoir, which is characterized by short water retention time. What I mean by that is, say, a water molecule goes into Noxon Reservoir in low flow. It's going to stay there for about 3 weeks before it goes all the way through. In runoff, you're looking at less than a week. That's really important for these what you call lentic fisheries, these lakes and reservoir fisheries. It's not where walleye and pike and stuff evolved. They're a little different than reservoirs that are used for that can hold these storage reservoirs like Fort Peck per se. It's the middle reservoir in the Clark Fork. So above it is Thompson Falls Reservoir, folks might be familiar with. Below it's Cabinet Gorge. It's the largest of the three lower Clark Fork reservoirs. Surface area is about 7,900 acres. Max depths around 200 feet, and it's approximately 39 miles long. Like I think I might have mentioned, it's owned and operated by Avista. That's that power company that operates the dam. There's 9 public boat ramps, 4 campgrounds. It's very accessible, and like you say, it's full of a bunch of fun recreational fisheries.
Yeah, it's a big reservoir. I mean, 39 miles. That's huge. So let's talk about the biology in the reservoir. When I'm talking about biology, I mean all the stuff that's swimming around in there and growing in the lake.
Yeah, so as we've hinted, there's a lot of fish in the reservoir, including largemouth bass, smallmouth bass. We have northern pike, walleye, yellow perch, pumpkin seed, northern pike minnow, large scale sucker, long nose sucker, lake whitefish, peamouth, yellow bullhead, brown trout, rainbow trout, West Slope cutthroat trout, bull trout, mountain whitefish. Those are the main species that you're probably going to run into. There's a smattering of ones that show up from time to time, but those are basically the species with established populations in the lake. And what most people are coming to fish Noxon for are those those non-native recreational fish species, the bass, the pike, the walleye, the perch, things that know well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and when you think about it, here west of the divide, you don't find very many places with walleye because walleye were never around here. And unfortunately, many years ago, someone did a little bucket biology, I guess, is how they ended up there, right?
Right. Yeah. The walleye were illegally introduced in the 80s and the 90s. And since the early 2000s, walleye numbers in the reservoir have increased pretty rapidly. We've seen that's been a big fish community change, especially in the last decade. But over the last 20 years, we've seen walleye numbers skyrocket. But at the same time, unfortunately, our native forage fishes, those that I mentioned earlier, large scale sucker, long nose sucker, and peamouth, those fish have had very rapid declines in response to walleyes taking hold and becoming very abundant.
They are voracious eaters for sure. So of all the species that you just mentioned, what would be the most abundant in Noxon Reservoir now? Would it be walleye, or is it? Tell us what's
no. Yeah, walleye are still, they're still down the totem pole quite a ways. It's forage fish. It's yellow perch are the most abundant by quite a large margin. If I'm thinking about our last gill netting surveys, we were getting about 20 yellow perch per net. The second most abundant fish is pumpkin seed in there, so another non-native forage fish. They're about 11 fish per net.
Okay.
You're looking at our predator species are only like, if you think about smallmouth bass are 2.6 fish per net, northern pike could be 2.2, and walleye are down to 1.7. But it's all relative. That's a huge increase from what we were seeing, before. The forage base is always going to be in a system. You'd hope it always to be much greater than the predator base, and of course that's what we're seeing in Noxon. So that's a good thing that we have a very stable and abundant forage base here in Noxon.
Okay, and just for our listeners and myself, just to kind of get us a little more familiar, which ones were the native fish to Noxon? You were saying there's bull trout, and go ahead and go through those for me.
Yeah, and I mean that question's a bit.
That's a tough one.
Because Noxon. Well, we know what was there, but Noxon's not a natural. It's
right.
It's a man-made reservoir. But native to the Clark Fork would be, like you say, bull trout, west slope cutthroat, northern pike minnow, large-scale sucker, long-nosed sucker, peamouth, and mountain whitefish. Whereas those non-native species that have been either introduced by FWP over the years, or a lot of them been illegal introductions. Largemouth bass, smallmouth bass, northern pike, walleye, perch, pumpkin seed, lake whitefish, yellow bullhead, brown trout, and rainbow trout.
And of the non-native side of it, are any of those? Are you trying to, completely eradicate any of those, or just into a more of an aggressive management deal? Because, like you were saying, walleye, they can take over a place if you let them. So, are any of those non-native fish, that you're trying to eradicate or reduce dramatically? For example, like we've talked several times to folks over on Flathead Lake, and the big, as they refer to them, the lake trout, they refer to them as the Mackinaw. They've really been working, the tribe has especially been working very hard to try to reduce those numbers dramatically, so that, some of the native trout species in there have a fighting chance. Are you doing any of those kind of things in Noxon?
We personally aren't.
Okay.
And there has been some I think misinformation on that. There was an EA in 2013 before my time here that FWP put out to investigate the suppression of walleye. That EA sought public input, and due to public comment, no action was taken on that.
Mm-hmm.
So no activities have been pursued to suppress walleye. The limit there is no limit on the regulation, no size limit, no abundance limit. You can take as many as you want, a lot like say like our perch regulation, right? So we have some very liberal regulations. For pike is 15 here, very liberal regulations, and we encourage anglers to harvest some fish just because we have a ton of predators in Noxon. That'd probably be one of the things we'd encourage folks to do, but there's no active suppression going on by us or any partners.
I'm really glad you brought that up because you're right. I think there are a lot of people that, and it kind of makes sense what you brought up there, that maybe when they were, considering, doing some suppression efforts or whatever, which never did take place, maybe people got the wrong idea, because I've gotten, a lot of emails or comments from people saying, oh, well, they're trying to get rid of the walleye and Noxon. It's like, no, I really don't think that's accurate. And so you've already cleared up one on my list here, which is great. So what is the limit for walleye per day in Noxon?
There is no limit.
Oh, there is no limit. Okay.
No limit,
Wow.
no size. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's part of the west of the divide. This is the only everywhere else. Walleye is a mandatory catch, kill, and report, right?
Right.
This is the only place they've been established west of the divide is Noxon. After those illegal introductions in the 90s and the 80s. But we do have that no limit regulation on it. It's like a perch regulation, right? You can keep as many as you want. And kind of hitting back onto what you were saying with kind of those misconceptions. We do, and I think this is what it is. People see us out there sampling walleye in the spring. We have some spring sampling of walleye, electrofishing that is.
Okay.
And they see us out there, and we're just looking at run timing, year class strength, abundance of those fish. But yeah, we monitor walleye annually, but again, there's no suppression going on. We have some liberal regulations like we just outlined for those, but many other species in the reservoir as well, where we're hoping that people can harvest some fish in Noxon, because there's a lot of mouths to feed out there.
Yeah, and that electrofishing thing, that I was just about to bring that up because, this was quite a long time ago. I got an email from somebody saying, "Oh, yes, they are too doing it, because I see them out there with that electric thing, trying to kill the walleye." It's like, no, but people get misunderstood and they aren't sure. And so this is, part of the reason why I do these podcasts is it really helps the fishermen get to know a water body a lot better, and also understand, what our friends in the FWP are doing, because so often, rumors get going and then it's really tough to get that turned around. And the whole idea, as I've tried to say so many times, is that's why they ask for your comment. I mean, we're all in this together. And so doing, a good example of saying, okay, here's how we manage walleye population is let's let the fishermen do it and let them get out there. And, no limit for right now. That's a hungry walleye fisherman's dream. They are an incredible eating fish. So, So let's talk a little bit about some of these other questions that I got, because our listeners we also do the Montana Outdoor Radio Show, which is live every Saturday morning from 6 to 8. And that's on now 30 radio stations across the state, but then also out on the web. So it's heard in, almost, I think, 100 different countries now, about every state. So, So let's get to some of those questions, because that'll kind of help clear up some of these other things, and never know, might even do you a bit of a favor too, as far as what we get. So let's start with the first one here. This one question is, why is the reservoir level being raised and lowered at almost the exact same time every spring from March to April?
Perfect. Yeah. So I'm going to back up a bit and try to explain how reservoir operation happens here on Noxon. So, like I said, Avista owns and operates Noxon Reservoir, and what's called the Clark Fork Settlement Agreement. Basically, it's the agreement for them to operate the dam in their FERC license, the Federal Energy Regulatory Committee, was penned in 1999, and that agreement outlines the operational flexibility that Avista has, how they can operate the dam, and it also provides how the funds to protect, mitigate, and enhance to offset those hydropower operations happen. So those funds I talked to you about earlier, and all the good fish work we're doing, and is outlined in that document. Now, this settlement agreement, it was signed, like I said, in '99 with 27 parties: Montana, Idaho, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Forest Service, 5 tribes, Sanders County, and numerous non-government organizations. It's a 45-year license for this dam, and kind of diving into the general operating limits. There's kind of 2 seasons. There's this non-recreational season, and that's defined as October 1st through May 14th, so through the winter there. And it's fall to the spring, kind of. Uh-huh. And that's when Avista can move the reservoir 10 feet to 23, 21, that's the elevation of the reservoir, to 23, 31. They can move within that 10-foot window. So that's kind of when they're talking about in the spring. During the recreational season, when that starts May 15th and goes through September 30th, they're brought down. They can only move the reservoir 4 feet. Now, during all times of the year, they're restricted to how fast they can draft the reservoir. They can't exceed 2 feet per day, and they can't exceed a net of 5 feet per week. Now, all these operating limits were negotiated and put in place to minimize negative effects of operations on first natural resources, of course, but also for the public's benefit. Now, all that being said, despite this, of course there still can be effects. And much of that Clark Fork Settlement Agreement is designed to directly either mitigate for those effects or otherwise offset those effects. Examples are all of Vista's land being around the reservoir is up for public use. You know, it's free and it's accessible to the public. All their recreation sites, boat launches, all the great fisheries work we're doing through FWP or partners, extending boat launches, et cetera. And so coming back to that original question, it really, so that springtime, March and April fall within that window, the non-recreational season.
Okay.
So they can move the reservoir 10 feet. And the pool is managed to maintain, that general compliance within those operating limits I kind of outlined. Mm-hmm. But they're also, they're utilizing their flexibility to reliably provide power to their customers. That's what it really comes down to. And with risk of putting my foot in my mouth, I won't get into all the reasons. Okay. There's power demand in the grid, because I don't know that. Those questions should be directed at Vista, but that's how it works. And there's just been, we hear a lot about this, and I'm sure you have got questions about this, and it's been particularly more of a topic of concern recently because of the spring walleye fishery that's emerged. Before, there wasn't a lot of people fishing Noxon in the spring, but over the last decade or so, a lot more people are fishing Noxon in the spring, and they're running into this drafting in the early season. They've been doing it, for a long time, and actually the drafting was much greater back in the day, before the 80s, but that's how it works, and it's within Avista's operational limits. And if somebody really wants to get in the weeds and why and when they're pulling water for power, that'd be an Avista question.
Yeah, in fact, I have a few calls and emails into Avista, and we are going to do a podcast with them, hopefully down the road here. And so we're definitely going to talk to them and ask them some questions about it too. We're going to take a quick break here, Travis. And when we come back, I want to get to another question concerning these changes in levels and how that may be adversely affecting the perch spawn. So we'll get to that right after this. Hey, gang, thanks for supporting and listening to this podcast. I can't tell you how much it means to all of us that you're here. And speaking of support, we would not be able to do this podcast at all if it weren't for sponsors like Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. It is truly an honor to have Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer on our team. You know, if you own a trailer, you ought to think about adding them to your team too. They can service your trailer, and when it comes to repairing trailers, well, you won't find anyone better at it than Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. If it's parts you need to do your own service and repairs, well, they are the place for that. Another thing you may not know about Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer is they install all kinds of accessories for the truck that pulls your trailer. Whether it's just the necessary items to help your truck get the trailer down the road perfectly, or all those gadgets and bells and whistles to dress your truck up a bit and, well, make it your unique style. And here's the best part. The folks that do all those repairs and installations are real technicians. They do things the right way and do it to such a degree of precision and reliability that you can roll down the road with confidence. Whether you need your trailer bearings packed, the whole thing rewired, or the right fifth wheel, or any kind of hitch installed, you're going to know that your trailer is ready to haul what you want worry-free. No matter if it's getting you and your four-legged coworker to the next rodeo or job, or just hauling a load to the dump, or getting the boat and RV to your favorite fishing hole, Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer has you covered. And of course, if you need a new trailer, they can set you up with a brand new Diamond C gooseneck equipment, dump trailer, or whatever else you need to haul wherever you are going worry-free, happy, and looking good, too. Heck, they even carry an amazing line of CM truck beds that'll make your rig look and work like new. It's what they do at Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. They're in Missoula, or you can find them on the web at rmtte.com. That's rmtte.com. Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. Go see them. We are back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast. My guest is fisheries biologist Travis Rame, and he's with the Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. And we're talking about Noxon Reservoir. And right now we're going through some questions that you folks have sent in to me, emails. And by the way, I encourage you, be sure and let us know. Anytime you have questions, we're more than happy to track down the answers for you. Now, this one talks about the concern. We were talking about these changes in the water levels, and the concern was that is the FWP aware perch spawning locations are being consistently dried up, and their year class gaps as well, documented by FWP data that match up with those drawdowns. So in other words, someone's looked at your data and looked at when they were drawn down and said, that's why there's gaps in perch year classes. Talk about that. And if have you guys seen the same kind of thing?
Yeah, no problem, Dale. So yeah, the perch spawns generally happening in that non-rec season. So Avista is able to draw the reservoir, that 10 feet window. And there's certainly some areas that could see drying. I wouldn't be surprised if they were talking about like the Finley Flats area. All that being said, our perch population, I don't quite know what they mean by the FWP year gaps. I've penned the monitor. I've been the lead author of the monitor report for the last 4 years, and have read many others, and we just don't see that. One, we don't have age data generally on perch, but we have some really good length history. And as I said, perch are the most abundant species in the reservoir by quite a bit. And actually, in 2023, we saw our highest perch numbers ever since 2000 is when the monitoring got standardized. Perch are very fecund. We just don't see population level effects from the drawdowns to perch populations. Of course, there could be individual events where we're drying some eggs, but as far as worries about the perch population, that is not one of them. Their recruitment is going well. And if folks do have a chance to look at any of those reports, you can see some pretty stable perch populations. And right now we're either at or near all-time highs for all of our non-native forage fish. But yeah, I'd be happy if anybody does see something like that, or if they're concerned something like that. People can always give me a call, me or Jason Blakeney, who's our fisheries management biologist in the area. We both of us work down here in Noxon.
Okay, great. So the other question deals with this. It says FWP spring and fall gillnet surveys from the last 3 years, smallmouth bass year classes have been increasing by very large numbers. What impact is this having on perch, pike minnow, and other forage species? And why is there a bass limit restrictions from June 15 to July 15?
Perfect. Yeah, I'll hit the first one first. I'm glad folks are reading some reports. That's always encouraging. I do want to clarify one thing. We don't perform any spring gill netting, so I think they're just referring to our fall gill netting surveys, which we do annually. Mm-hmm. And particularly the last 2 years, I don't know about 3, but 2 years, the smallmouth have shown some pretty substantial jumps in abundance. Last year, they represented about 6% of our total catch, and that's highest on record. So you're thinking about 2.6 fish per net, which we were talking earlier. And that's up from a mean of around, we were getting around 1 fish per net, the average for the 20 odd years before that. So that's a big jump. I do want to take that with one grain of salt, and I wrote this in that report with this individual likely saw as well. We've had 2 very unseasonably warm weather fall gill netting events, and that is correlated with extremely unseasonably warm water temperatures during these last 2 gill netting events. There's a more, there's a likely chance that increases susceptibility of those keeping bass in those shallow water a little longer, susceptibility to our gill nets. So I'm not entirely sure how much of an increase of bass we've seen, but our future gill net surveys should shed light on that. But it appears so far that we are seeing an increase in smallmouth in the reservoir. As far as their effects on our forage fish, we haven't seen any. I've kind of mentioned this already, but yellow perch, pumpkin seed, and to a lesser extent lake whitefish, those non-native forage species, are near or at all-time highs, according to our last gill netting survey. Kind of on the flip side of that, though, our native forage fish species, peamouth, peamouth, large-scale sucker, and northern pike minnow, they've seen drastic declines over the last 20 years. Granted, that is more likely due to the introduction and establishment of walleye, not this contemporary little bump in bass numbers over the last couple of years, but that's likely what we're seeing there, and yeah, so there's a good chance bass numbers have bumped up. Time will tell. I'm hoping to get a more normal water temp in the gill netting survey this year, but that's kind of where we're at with regard to smallmouth. Now, I guess on the bass restriction or the bass regulation question, mm-hmm. That's a special regulation enacted to protect spawning bass. So both bass species, both largemouth and smallmouth, are nest guarding. They have nest guarding males to protect those newly hatched broods. And angling during that time when they're protecting those broods on those beds, as many folks probably listening here know, that can negatively influence recruitment of those fish, pulling those males off. So to protect bass, the regulation includes both of our lower 2 Clark Fork reservoirs, Noxon and Cabinet. And this special regulation allows 5 fish to be harvested and in possession of any size except between June 15 and July 15, when only 1 fish over the length of 22 inches can be kept. So it's functionally a trophy regulation. And this regulation provides protection by limiting harvest of spawning and nest guarding bass and prevents tournaments from occurring over that time. it's based on some work done in the early 2000s in Noxon Reservoir that found H0 largemouth bass to be hatched between June 21st and July 3rd in both low water and high water years. And because incubation of bass eggs is about 3 to 5 days, it's assumed that spawning bass in Noxon begin around June 15th or after June 15th and even on low water years, hence the reasoning behind the June 15 to July 15 exception.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank you for clearing up some of those things there. And I do want to let our listeners know that you can email me, as I said, anytime, downrigger@montanooutdoor.com. And Travis, I assume, is it okay if I we have in the podcast description, we have I put links in for people to be able to get more information on some of the things that I talk about. Would it be all right to put a link to your email address so people can ask directly, or would you rather it go through me?
Nope, no problem. You can
okay.
you can have folks contact me with any questions. I'd be happy to field them.
Perfect. Well, then, folks, just look for that there. I'll say if you'd like to contact Travis, click here, and it'll just open up your email program, and boom, you can write your email and send it off to him. And yeah, let's keep the discussion going. Keep it polite, mind you, but let's keep it going and get some more information on that. What would you say, Travis, is, we're talking about some of these misconceptions. What would you say is probably the top 3 things that keep coming up that, people are not reading right? And again, sometimes that's just the good old fashioned rumor mill. Sometimes that's folks misunderstanding some data. What are those top 3, do you think?
Yeah. I for sure got top 2.
Okay.
The big ones, and we've covered these. It's water level fluctuations, weather. I think I've heard, everything in between, but they're being fluctuated to eradicate an X species or whatever. But as we hit on it, pool elevations managed to maintain compliance. It's managed by Avista, but it's maintained compliance with those general operating limits we talked about. And they do that to provide electricity for their customers.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we're running into a few more issues just because folks are fishing in the non-rec season, with the popular walleye fishery that we have here now.
Right.
The second main one that we hit on early, and I'm glad we did, but I want to touch on it again, is the walleye point. We always get questions, people. There's always suppression going on or whatever. We saw you out there in the boat, but as we put, FWP or partners are not taking any action to suppress or negatively impact the walleye fishery in Noxon. Again, that 2013 EA came out, and due to public comment, that was not pursued. And we sample walleye every spring via boat electrofishing. I actually got anecdotal results back on that, just preliminary, I should say, not anecdotal. But we still have some big year classes out there. 2015 is still pretty big. 2019 is big, and as expected, as we've kind of been following them in the Gillnet surveys, because that's the other way we monitor walleye. We have a pretty big 2021 year class of walleye, and I won't be surprised if we have a big one in 2024. But yeah, we keep our tabs on them. Monitoring is super important for us, and right now there's a lot of them in the reservoir.
Mm-hmm. Well, and another thing that, when people see that electro fishing boat going through there, I was just thinking about this as we were talking. I remember a question coming across saying, well, when they're doing that, that's right around the walleye spawning season. Does that affect and interfere with their spawning season? Do you see that? I mean, is it done to that degree of frequency that it would interfere with the spawning season?
Yep. No. So we do target them. That's why we're doing it in the spring, so we can actually get our hands on them. They're up up in the upper reservoir. But yeah, no, it's not done in the frequency. It's such a small number of fish we're touching in the, it's a drop in the bucket per se, in the scheme of things. And if you just look at our general population numbers, they've just been climbing over the last, 10, 20 years. So yeah, I've heard that a lot, but no, I mean, we tag a ton of fish after we sample them in the spring, and we see a lot of those tags year after year, because these are long-lived fish. Every year we take a subsample of those fish for aging purposes, and I've seen walleye up to 18 years old in Noxon. We consistently see them up in the 15 or 16-year-old every year class. So, I mean, they're long-lived fish here.
Sure.
And we, like I say, we tag and see fish we sample on the walleye spawning bar very consistently year after year. So again, just pointing to the survival of those fish after sampled, it's minimal. So, long answer to a short question, but no, we don't have any population level effects when we're doing those spring samples.
Okay. Well, another concern, I think, just in general that all of us have this year is, we just did not see the snowpack that, we traditionally see in Western Montana, to the point that, there's some pretty ugly forecasts out there, of potential pretty heavy drought conditions. How do you think that's going to affect Noxon? Have you got any forecasts of what that's going to do to water level or that? Of course, some of it, you can't predict the future. You don't know, but what are you guys thinking there? Because I know it's been a pretty big concern really all across the state, but especially Western Montana really did not see much snowpack.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's always a concern. Fish need water, right? It's a simple equation. And to be honest, we have a lot of concerns here in Western Montana, but most of them are with our native fish species and the tributaries. Talking about Noxon specifically, we're really lucky. It's a run of the river reservoir, like I explained earlier. What goes in kind of comes out, right? Mm-hmm. We're not a storage reservoir. We don't have that capability here. So water levels will stay relatively constant, normal. The effects we could have from this low water year, we're going to have likely greater possibility of harmful algal blooms, those cyanobacteria blooms up in our, kind of those bays or stagnant waters. We see those occasionally here in Noxon, and they can have localized fish kills. Nothing that's going to have a population level effect. It'll kill some perch or a lot of young fishes that hang out in those areas. But water temps are going to be of concern, more for not fish survival, but more for angling caught fish survival. So we're going to really ask anglers to try and release fish quickly. Those anglers that participate in the many tournaments held on Noxon, I always advocate for those guys to freeze like milk jugs and put them in their live well, because the guys that do that, because we monitor a subset of those tournaments every year, and the guys that do that, those bass come in such better condition than folks that just pull surface reservoir water all day long, and those, that's rough on those bass. So fish handling is going to be a big deal. The one interesting caveat to a low water year that's kind of counterintuitive to most is us talking about, let's say, walleye and bass. So we expect a couple good year classes of bass and walleye. So since kind of coming back to that run of the river, low water residence time stuff, bass, walleye didn't involve in environments like what we have in Noxon. And what the biggest predictor of year class strength for bass and walleye in Noxon is water levels, and it's inversely correlated with big water years. So what I'm basically saying is there's a silver lining here for recreational anglers that, we might have a low water year and that's not good for most things. It's very likely that we're going to have a good year class of both of those two recreational species this year.
Okay. Well, that's nice. We get a little good news there.
Yeah.
So one of the other things that I wanted to talk a bit about, and we're going to take another quick break, but when we come back is, when we see reservoirs like this kind of evolve and the word gets out of, hey, this is a really great fishery and all that. And, maybe our podcast might have something to, you might be able to blame us as more fishing pressure comes in. And then you've got your recreational boaters and, the big trend with the wakeboard boaters and that. I want you to address that a little bit as far as if that's affecting not just the temperature, what am I going to say? The temperature of the anger with some fishermen, but how that might be affecting shorelines and things like that. So we'll talk about that right after this. Another huge thank you needs to also go out to my friends at Superior Hardwoods of Montana. Without their support, we simply would not have a podcast. Just like us, you can depend on Superior Hardwoods of Montana, especially when you're ready to turn the place you live into your home. Now, what do I mean? Well, the place you live is not really your home until it reflects who you are. One of the best ways to do that is to go see my friends at Superior Hardwoods of Montana. For example, they have some incredible antique redwood reclaimed from a Marcus Daly water plume built back in 1917, running from Georgetown Lake to the Phillipsburg mines. They have many other reclaimed options to choose from, as well as like corral board, antique oak, granary lumber, barn siding that is beautifully aged from natural weathering. That could be perfect for your home's soffit, siding, or paneling on an accent wall. They also have antiqued hand-hewn beams and saw-cut timbers that in a way is a tribute to our American history and to your home. Superior Hardwoods is also the place to find the perfect wood to create the ultimate outdoor space, like that incredible deck you've always wanted. Yeah, Superior Hardwoods of Montana is for sure your decking headquarters. Not only do they have a variety of exotic hardwood decking options, but they also have domestic classic traditional cedar. And the best part of that is they are offering exclusive pricing on gorgeous high-quality cedar decking right now. There are lots of benefits to cedar decking. It is resistant to temperature and weather conditions. It won't warp due to moisture. It is rot resistant and requires less maintenance than other softwoods. Go see them on the web at superior-hardwoods.com or stop by their showroom in Missoula and let them guide you through the woods. Remember, on the web it's superior-hardwoods.com. Oh, you're gonna love what they do to your home. We are back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast, and before I get back to Travis Rame, who's with the FWP, and we're talking about Noxon Reservoir, I also wanted to remind you folks, this is the time of the year. If you've got friends or family that live outside of Montana, or heck, even in Montana, that maybe don't get out and explore their own backyard, you might want to check out what I'm about to say here with the folks at Visit Montana. In Montana, discover a land where adventure roams free. Explore small towns where every corner tells a story and every greeting comes with a smile. Saddle up for breathtaking horseback rides or catch a fish in a crystal clear lake. Spend your evening sharing stories around a campfire under a starlit sky. That's how you Montana. Plan your trip at visitmt.com. That's visitmt.com. So why not be sure and invite your friends and family. Now, back to Travis Rame, and let's talk a bit about, and I hear this a lot. In fact, on the Montana Outdoor Radio Show, I also do the trivia questions and that, and I purposely did some trivia questions about boating etiquette and about that just to kind of remind people, there are some general rules of the waterway here that we got to be a little more respectful to each other, especially when fishermen are out there and you're just recreational boating. Yes, you have a right to do that, but let's give a little space. Like in Noxon, we've got 38 miles, 39 miles of water. You got plenty of room to go. How is like the big wakeboards and boating and, creating those great big wakes and that, is that messing with shoreline erosion or any of that you guys see?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly problems with that, and particularly when folks aren't following the rules. I think that's a problem basically everywhere. We do the rule is if I believe it's 200 yards, you can't throw a wake 200 yards from the shore. And actually I just got 9 or 10 signs from Kalispell headquarters, and us and our partners have been putting them out at all the fishing access sites at Noxon and Cabinet to reinforce that rule, let folks know, because we do run into problems with that, and I know that'd be a big enforcement question because they're dealing with this stuff all the time. Not everybody plays by the rules, and when they don't, there's certainly shoreline effects. You throw in a big wake into the shore of a reservoir with a lot of houses and cabins around it. There's going to be problems, and we run into those issues, and people call us, and we usually forward that on to the local warden. And I know he spends a lot of time talking to folks that are not fishermen, but are, like you say, those recreational folks on the reservoir.
Well, and I've we talk quite often with Aaron Berg, who comes by our local show we do just in Missoula, and he's also spent some time with me on this podcast and that, and he's also encouraged people to let the wardens know Montana's a big state, and the wardens have a lot of space they have to cover, and so they can't be everywhere, but they do want to hear about it. So, use the 1-800-TIP-MONT and other places to get a hold of your local warden. Now, I also heard that they have given the local sheriffs the authority now to be able to enforce some of that too. So that could be another option if you've got somebody that's just really getting out of hand. You could go that route too, and the sheriff's department can come down and have a chat with some people and that. But let's all be good people and take care of each other and watch out. So, are there any, what I would say, major changes that the FWP has planned for Noxon Reservoir that would be coming up that you can share with us?
No, not really. I think the main point I'd like to get across on that is Noxon's in a good spot right now. We have some phenomenal recreational fisheries, the ones that I hit on, and the one thing that we could probably, point to that we'd like to see happen, at least on a local level, is some reduction in some of those predator species. But again, the lever we're using for that is just anglers, like I said. We're encouraging folks to harvest some walleye, to harvest some northern pike, to harvest a smallmouth. Those are the big things that we'd like to see happen in the reservoir. I mean, pie in the sky would be to try and recover some of those native forage fishes, but that's a difficult problem, especially when you're managing a reservoir primarily for bass and other recreational fish species. Sometimes those two goals don't run parallel. So we're working on that, but it's not an easy solution. Mm-hmm. There's also a lot of emphasis being put on, and this is kind of outside the recreational fisheries realm, but on improved fish passage at both of those reservoirs, both Noxon and Cabinet. There was a new fish passage facility created at Cabinet Gorge that's operated by our partners at Avista, and they're catching bull trout, West Slope cutthroat, and they're moving those fish to their tributaries, kind of circumventing the marginal habitat that was created by these reservoirs. That one is such a great recreational fishery, but it's not great for our bull trout and our West Slope cutthroat. So some of those mitigation dollars that I discussed as part of the CFSA are happening in the Noxon pool area, but it's to mitigate for Noxon and allow bull trout to access tributary habitat that's been excluded from them and to express that migratory life history where they get really big in Lake Pend Oreille is what they're doing, eating kokanee and such.
Well, that's kind of cool that they're working on that. And again, we'll try to get some people from Avista on and chat with them a bit about that. Are there things that us fishermen can do to help your guys' efforts? Like I say, get out and fish. That always helps. Is there anything else that you would like to see or maybe get more comments from fishermen? I know that's one thing that I hear a lot of times from FWP is, gee, we announce public comment time. We want to hear from you. And we don't get as many as we would like. So talk about that. Are there things we as fishermen can do better to help you guys out on Noxon?
Yeah, I think you nailed them both.
Okay.
One would be, especially Noxon, don't hesitate to harvest some fish like we talked about. Go get a meal and the regulations are in place for a reason. But the second one I think is one that I'd love to see is don't hesitate to tell us about your experience. Stop in the office, give us a call, respond to those public comments. If you have time, come to the whatever open houses. They occasionally happen in Kalispell or Thompson or whatever. We just don't see a ton of participation in those. There's a few people that are very passionate and
Sure.
show up and comment or whatever. But I think even myself as an angler, like if we want things to change, we have to be involved. And yeah, that takes some time out of our day, but if you're passionate about it, I think it's important to just be involved. And I think you're nailing it on the head. And that's a message I think you've been trying to drive home, for a lot longer than this podcast.
Yeah, we definitely have, because, I see it, all the time that whenever people take that passion and bring it to a meeting, and that it really helps out. And I've talked to so many different biologists as well as, other people in FWP and other agencies. They really do want to hear these comments. And it kind of gets my fur up on the back of my neck when people say, oh, they just don't listen. Yeah, they do. They really, really do. And so the more we, work together on this, the better off all of our fisheries are going to be. So I hope people take that to heart. I really do. As far as, you were saying that Noxon's in a good place. So overall, the health of the fishery is pretty darn good, do you think?
Yeah, no, like I say, we're in a good spot. As far as bass, that tournament monitoring I've hinted at continues to show a productive bass fishery in Noxon. Sizes and proportion of quality fish, those fish like over 15 inches or so, of both largemouth and smallmouth are being captured at or near record highs. We have abundances of both walleye and northern pike at or near record highs. The one caveat you could say, condition has fallen those two species a little bit. Again, that's why one of the reasons why we're advocating for maybe a little more harvest on those species. But generally, we're in a really good spot for recreational fisheries and the forage base for those non-native species. Like I said, so far, the yellow perch, pumpkin seed, and to a lesser extent, we're just not sure how important they are as a forage species in Noxon. Lake whitefish are at all-time highs. We have a good non-native forage base. The one caveat to that is that what I've been hitting on is the native forage base, those native suckers and minnows, large-scale sucker, peamouth, and pike minnow. They've shown some really drastic, some of them just falling out, which is unfortunate. And again, it correlates really well with the establishment of walleye, and that's where we believe the downfall of those native forage species have been, just another predator, and one that's really good at targeting those species. So that's the bad news in Noxon. It's marginal habitat for basically all of the natives, but it is phenomenal habitat for these non-native recreational fish species that many people like to come capture, and what we're talking about here today and what it's managed for the bass species.
Lastly, Travis, one of the links I wanted to put on in the podcast description was a report that I thought might be helpful if people want to, dig through that. And I think these reports can be very useful to fishermen if sometimes, they're not worded for pleasure reading, but they really can be some great information. And what I saw was a report that is titled the 2023 Annual Project Update. Is that the most updated report? Would that be a good one to put a link to that would give people some good info?
Yep, that's the most recent. I just finished that one up this winter.
Okay, so that is very new then.
It has data from last year. So we just finished our walleye sampling for the spring. That's the only new stuff that's not in there, right? And that'll come out again likely this winter in the 2024 report. So that's super current. That was all last year's stuff. That'll highlight again the spring walleye sampling, the fall gill netting, and then bass tournament monitoring. It's just an annual update, kind of a snapshot of what the reservoir is doing, what we're seeing in it. So, yeah. So
I'll have that link in there, folks. Just click on that. Boom, that'll pop up. And then, you can even download it as a PDF and spend some time, go through that. And then when that might either answer a lot of questions for you or it could spur some questions. And then, be sure and send those questions on to Travis or to me, and we will do our best to get those answered. Well, Travis, I really, really appreciate you spending all this time with me and talking about this great reservoir. And for those of you out there that have not come west of the Divide and tried Noxon, give it a try. This is a cool place, and I think you're really going to have some fun with it, especially those of you in western Montana that don't get a crack at walleye. This is a good place to do it. So, Travis, thanks so much for spending time with me, and I hope you'll be able to come back again and give us some updates, and maybe we can talk about Cabinet Gorge and that another time, too.
Yeah, that sounds great. It was a pleasure. I appreciate you putting out the good word, and I'm very appreciative that you just give us a spot and can get some of the message out.
You bet. Anytime, Travis. Well, there you have it, folks. Noxon Reservoir. Want to give it a try? I'm going to also get a link to a map, so if you've never heard of it, you'll know right where to go. And go out there and have some fun and let us know how you do. Until then, folks, be good to each other, have fun, be safe, and we'll see you next time here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Montana Outdoor Podcast. It has been brought to you in part by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. And by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. So what did you think of today's podcast? Send your questions and comments to Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com. We should be dropping a new podcast this next Saturday. Until then, we will see you soon out in Montana's great outdoors.